We're really honored to have the Dean of the UTSA College of Public Policy here, and we're going to he's going to give a couple words and that kind of thing. So, Dean Sines, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone to our beautiful downtown campus, and I'd like to thank you for Drew for bringing the conference here. I think this is a great place to have the conference and engage students and so forth. A little bit about the college. We're located here in the downtown campus. About 1,500 students, about a third are graduate students. So we have graduate programs in criminal justice, in public administration, and social work, and then a PhD program in demography. We also have undergraduate programs in criminal justice and public administration. We have wonderful students who are doing a lot of great work. In the city here in San Antonio, there's it's not a contest, it's a recognition for the top individuals, the movers and shakers that are under age 40. So it's called the 40 under 40. And typically we have a number of our students that graduate from our College of Public Policy that are among those students. We also have a couple of our students that were selected to go to the Archer program in Washington, D.C., Archer scholars and so forth. So there's a lot of really great things going on. I love my job because it's one that allows the intersection between research, teaching, and community engagement. So very much in line with the mission of this particular conference, trying to bring that conversation between academicians, instructors, and then people in the community. And there's some of our students are here. They're doing great work. Obviously, Drew is one of our students who finished our program a year or two ago, I believe. Chris Stewart is here. Chris, there he is. And then we also had Zach Dunn, who was our president, here as well. And it's great to see, I think, the ray of hope of young people going into these professions, particularly when we see kind of the ugliness that we see on the national debates taking place. So it's a really nice ray of hope. And for instructors, professors, educators, and so forth, it's wonderful to see people that go through our programs that become leaders. Earlier, Representative Mike Villarreal was here. I was a professor at Texas A&M, where he was an undergraduate student. He worked for me as a work study student. He was doing research for me. So it's great to see students then, as they're college students, and they make their mark and go on to accomplish great things. So again, I'd like to welcome you. And I've been enjoying this conference a lot, and will continue being here the rest of the afternoon. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Sines. We're really, really excited about this next panel. Our third panel of the day is Innovating Your Career. And so this is really going to discuss how you can branch out. It's not all about going to law school and as your path to elected official. If you want to work in the private sector, you can do that. And so we've got some really, really great guests here today. I'm going to introduce the moderator, and then Dr. Jaramillo is going to introduce the rest of the panel. So our moderator today is Dr. Patricia Jaramillo. She is an associate professor here at the Department of Public Administration at UTSA. And she is a 2015 Regents Award winner, outstanding teacher, and she specializes specifically in Latina political education. So thank you so much, and Dr. Jaramillo, I'll let you introduce the panel.
Okay, I guess this is active. Yeah. So we have a wonderful panel, again, to reiterate what Drew said, and also thanks for the promotion, Drew, because you just moved me from lecturer to associate professor. So but we have a great panel. We have Dia Campos from HEB, Brian Halderman from here at UTSA, and Kathy Garcia from CPS. And so we're going to talk, as Drew said, about life in politics, being engaged in the public sector beyond the elected and running for public office. So what I asked our panelists to actually start with is telling you their path to their current career and current position. And if you'll go ahead and give your formal position as well. So Dia, you want to start?
All right, I'll go first. I'm going to try to take this really long, complicated story of mysteries and truncate it into a couple of minutes. But my name's Dia Campos. I'm currently the Director of Public and Government Affairs for HEB, which many of you know we're headquartered here in San Antonio, and we're the largest privately held employer in Texas. My path to a career in politics is interesting. I started as an undergraduate. Well, first of all, my family was always politically active. I grew up in Kyle, Texas, Hays County. Election day was a holiday in my family. Everyone got to take off of school, and we all worked the polls for somebody that my family was supporting. And so grew up in a very civically active family in Kyle, and went on to undergraduate at Southwestern University, where I met Dr. Jaramillo, who was one of my professors, I guess maybe my sophomore or junior year, I can't recall. And at Southwestern, I thought I wanted to go to law school, like everybody typically does who's civically minded. They think that is the only path to civic engagement. So started off in pre-law, and picked the best law firm in Texas at the time, Vincent & Elkins Law Firm, to intern at. Got into their pre-law internship program, which is pretty vigorous, very highly competitive program. And ended up working in the public policy section for Vincent & Elkins Law Firm, which was a great learning experience for me. I quickly discovered I did not want to be a lawyer. Working in a law firm for 4 years during undergrad, you get to see a lot of what being a lawyer really means. And I realized that was not the kind of impact I was probably best suited for. And I decided, I really liked working in the public policy division. I would be late nights at the Capitol, watching the Appropriations Committee until 2, 3 a.m. It's kind of fascinating seeing how the law is really made. Then got involved in several political races. I worked on several campaigns throughout undergraduate school, and met a lot of great people, some of the best friends in my life. I met through politics, through working in the Capitol. After undergrad, I worked for Vincent & Elkins Law Firm as a lobbyist. I was the youngest lobbyist in the state of Texas at the age of 21 at that time. And then got recruited by Hilco Partners, which is one of the largest lobbying firms in the state. Worked for Hilco Partners and several clients of Hilco for a couple of sessions and then I realized that when you're working as a consultant in any field, not just political consulting, it wears on you, and you get to know different personalities of your clients. And one of my clients was HEB at the time. And at the time, that was 2006 maybe, HEB only lobbied for public education issues. They were really not concerned about business tax issues or other business issues that were impacting them at the Capitol, and I thought that was kind of interesting for such a large company. So they were my favorite client, and I thought to myself, if I was going to do this in-house somewhere or for anybody else, I would want to be at HEB. And so 10 years later, here I am at HEB. My responsibilities cover being the media spokesperson for the company, and also charitable giving, community relations, and government affairs. When I came to the company, HEB really didn't have a government affairs division. And so we've slowly created that over these past 10 years, and I now manage our state lobby team, which does include my former employer, Hilco. That's always fun and interesting. But feel really, really blessed to be in this role and to be advocating at the state capitol on behalf of a really great company.
Brian?
So my path to where I'm at now is kind of also an interesting one and a little bit meandering, so I'll try to summarize. I think I grew up in a household also that was very interested and engaged in the community and in the political arena. I grew up in a divided household. My father was registered Republican, my mother Democrat, was like that all of their lives, so that made for interesting table conversation. I kind of always had an interest in service and serving others from very young. And so when I went off to college, I was really unsure exactly what to major in or where I wanted to go. And I actually was thinking about becoming a Roman Catholic priest when I went off to college. And so I ended up going to the University of Dayton, a Catholic university in Ohio. I'm from northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area originally. And ended up studying religious studies, theology for my undergraduate with a minor in social work. And so I did that path, and it was good. It was a really robust liberal arts education, and I'm really grateful that I had that as my undergraduate degree. But ultimately, I didn't end up going that path for myself. I ended up in St. Louis, eventually in St. Louis, working on a master's degree after a couple of years of working, and worked on a master's in social work at Washington University in St. Louis, a very reputable social work program. And my focus always really wanted to be sort of a macro perspective of the profession. So looking at public policy development, my concentration in the program was social and economic development, sort of with an international focus. Ended up doing my final field placement with the program in Peru for a year, working in a sort of a post-secondary school, doing a lot of grant writing and studying employability of minority youth in Peru. And so that was a really fascinating experience. I got to work with a lot of Latin American scholars who were studying issues of employability and sort of oppression of minority youth in Central America, Latin America, Central and South America. So that was a really enriching experience for me, and also helped me work on my Spanish. I ended up staying a year in Peru working on Spanish. Came to San Antonio after that year to work at St. Mary's University, where I took a position that was sort of kind of a love of both interests. So I became the University Minister for Social Justice, where I was sort of engaging that undergraduate piece of my studies in theology and religious studies with an interest in sort of social justice and advancing the common good, and doing a lot of developing really, I was the first person in that position at St. Mary's, so developing a lot of programming for students that were engaging them in the community, helping them see some of the challenges, social challenges our community might have faced, really engaging them in reflection on those issues, supporting some of the service learning initiatives at the university. And then that brought me here to UTSA. I've been here 2 years now, and I serve as the director of the Center for Civic Engagement here at UTSA. A fairly new entity at UTSA, not new totally to higher education. So one of the things when I started working in higher education was I really wasn't aware that there are civic engagement or community engagement professionals in higher education. It is a sort of growing recognition or growing movement that you can have a career in higher education as a community engagement professional. And we do a variety of things, but principally our work is to really live out that public service mission of the institutions. So almost every institution of higher ed, whether private or public, has something in their mission, some aspect of their mission that's about engaging the public, public service angle or advancing the common good, advancing the public good. You hear different language for that. And so that's really kind of the realm I'm in, I would say, in terms of my social work education really prepared me well to do this type of work. It's a lot of bridge building between the community and the institution, helping students be engaged through service learning courses, through extracurricular types of community engagement initiatives, through programming like this to really elevate the conversation on civic engagement. And so I've really enjoyed that journey to where I am now, and I really do think that sort of that liberal arts base and my focus, professional studies and social work, has really prepared me well to do what I'm doing now. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Brian. Kathy?
So I am responsible for the advocacy work for CPS Energy at the state and the federal level. And being all in San Antonio, I presume you are aware, but I'll mention a fact that CPS Energy is the nation's largest municipally owned electric and natural gas utility. So it's a unique and fun, exciting opportunity to be in this position, to be messaging on policy matters that are of interest to CPS Energy both at the state and the federal level. And how I arrived at this position is a resemblant of what you've heard the other panelists mention, raised by my parents to think about and understand public issues and current events and be able to speak about those at home. And I've also arrived at the position I'm at right now with the help and the guidance of mentors, which I found particularly helpful to me throughout my entire career. And then I entered this work arena with the help of internships and non-paid internships at that. So when I was growing up, I mentioned that we talked about current affairs in my household quite a bit. I knew that I wanted to go to the University of Texas at Austin, and I knew I wanted to be a government major. I knew I wanted to work around public policy. So I accomplished those things, and then while I was at the university, I interned, and I literally walked into the doors of City Council here in San Antonio one summer and said, who will take a free intern? And that was my entrance into the work environment. I did an internship for District 5 on the west side of San Antonio, and I did that every day for the 3 months I was here for that summer. And then from there, that particular internship has pretty much shaped and molded my career going forward. It's had an impact in my job every which way. When I went back to school to complete my undergrad, I got an internship at the Attorney General's office. Again, an unpaid internship. But I was put into the Intergovernmental Relations Department and got a broad spectrum of what state agency is about. State agencies don't advocate, they don't lobby, but they are responsible for monitoring all the activities that are going on in and around the legislature as well as inside each state agency. So from the Attorney General's perspective, you're supposed to represent those state agencies in any kind of legal battle. And I worked on a team that got broad knowledge of state government across the board. It's a really exciting opportunity. And that unpaid internship actually led to a paid job at the Attorney General's office. I worked in what was called the Citizens Advisory Committee, and we answered constituent calls and letters that came into the Attorney General, a lot from people who thought the Attorney General could help them directly. And since the Attorney General represents the state, these folks needed to know where to go get some help. And so our unit was there to help direct and to advise, and we really had some very unique success stories out of that department. In one instance, we actually helped a couple who was looking to adopt, and they had trouble finding their way through the system, and at the end it was successful. I held on to that letter as a neat token of success there. And so from there, the Attorney General's office had asked that I take over correspondence that was coming in from elected officials to the Attorney General directly. So I did a lot of writing on behalf of the Attorney General. I had to think about what that Attorney General would say in response to certain inquiries coming into their office. So that was an interesting way to have to think, like, what would an elected or an appointed official do when they're posed with questions? So I got an opportunity to see state government from that side. And from there, I transferred over to a private lobby firm. So I worked in the private sector for several years and represented a number of clients, whether it was the crop dusters or the marriage and family therapists. We had the Texas State Judges Association. So in the private firm, we represented a whole bunch of different clients, much like what Dio was talking about with Hilco. And similar to her story, we represented the city of San Antonio, and we represented a number of the chambers of commerce, including the Greater Chamber. And I learned that CPS Energy had an Austin-based office in which to do the advocacy work for the utility. And so my name was tossed into a pool of candidates, and that came from the link of representing the city entities. And from there, I was hired to come on board with CPS Energy, and I've been there now for 16 years. So that's my story.
Thank you. And I think I said careers in the public sector, but it's really careers in politics. And when we talk about the sectors, recognize that we're talking about the private sector, which we see with HEB. We have the public sector and CPS, or quasi-public, right? Public.
Municipally, yes,
Yes.
municipal.
And then academic or nonprofit sector, which is a huge third sector now. One of the questions that we'd like to know from you all is, what do you see as the relationship between the different sectors? Public, private, nonprofit, academic, and how do you navigate those sectors? Kathy, you want to start?
Sure. So I think that San Antonio entities are always going to come together to help the interests of San Antonio causes, whether it's private or public. For CPS Energy, being a government entity, there's several things that we cannot do, and there are things that private entities can do. And so we look for public-private partnerships in order to further whatever the goal might be for the community. An example that I can give in my particular arena is that there are tax incentives for renewable energy. And the community has stated that they'd like to see wind and solar developed. And in order to bring that online, it's a cost. And there are tax incentives that are offered to entities that are taxable. And so we have partnered with those entities so that they can achieve the cost savings. And they own the infrastructure, they build the infrastructure, and then we buy the power. And so it's a partnership in order to bring something to the community that crosses both sectors. And again, I would bring it home too, whenever there's a legislative session or there's an item that's before Congress and it's San Antonio based, the San Antonio entities will often come together and rally for those causes to bring the benefits back to the community.
I would add in my role, part of what I see as my effort is to leverage the resources of the institution of higher ed in the community or for the good of the community. So when I see opportunities to help leverage expertise of scholars on campus to bring to bear to a particular critical need of the community, trying to help those relationships happen. So even just recently had a meeting with the mayor talking about some of her policy priorities and thinking about who on campus can we connect to the mayor's office to help initiate some research initiatives or engage undergraduate students in those efforts, et cetera. So that's a lot of my role, is sort of bridging those divides between entities and institutions. And I also see that too with the nonprofit sector and some of the public sector and a little bit of the private sector too, in terms of where students are doing volunteer service, internship placements, or engagement like that in the community, and sort of ensuring that we have good mutually beneficial relationships between those entities, between those different sectors. So obviously hosting events here on campus to bring those together for conversation, those kinds of things to ensure that there's some mutuality in our work and that it's sustainable, because obviously that's an important part. We don't want to just send students in and out of an agency or with the sector, but we'd really like to have a sustained relationship where it's really beneficial to both parties.
Yeah, I would agree. So approaching issues in the legislature, you have to really know your stakeholder group. You have to look at what person is going to be against me, who's going to be for me, who are all the stakeholders. And when you look at that stakeholder list, it's usually public sector, private sector, and a lot of academia is involved, specifically like we do a lot of work in the transportation arena. HEB has almost 400 tractors and trailers going up and down Texas highways every day. It's a big issue for us, but when you look at the transportation issue as a whole, there's a lot of academia involved. We partner with Texas A&M, who is doing this robust study about how to move cargo up and down highways in a more efficient and safe way. And in that you have the public sector with TxDOT and different municipalities and the state as well. So when you're approaching issues in any realm of conflict, whether it's in a public affairs arena or in a legislative arena, you always look at that stakeholder group. And when you look at your stakeholders, you'll always see a cross-section of interest.
Thank you. What about issues of board service and volunteerism? How are those important today in your worlds, and how can students think about getting involved?
Yeah, I'll go first on that. HEB is extremely passionate about volunteerism, and we actually use board service in our corporation as a form of leadership development. So my department works really close with HR to identify who are those up-and-coming leaders in our company that need to get experience that are outside of the company. Serving on a board is the best way to expand your network and to expand your understanding of how things work. So when we place people in our corporation on boards, we expect them to understand the financials. If it's somebody who's not strong in the realm of financial accounting, this is their opportunity to step outside of the company and really learn that from other people on the board who are experts. So board service is definitely a sign of leadership. It's a way to expand your network and a way to really take the opportunity to learn something and sharpen your skills in areas that you may not be great in.
Yeah, the thing I'll add to that too is I think it's important to identify things in the community that you're passionate about to connect with. So either through your volunteerism, if there's particular issues you're passionate about, to be engaged in those issues. And I think board service and further engagement with agencies come with time, obviously. But if an agency or an organization sees you as being a committed volunteer, sees you as engaged with the issue, sees you as knowledgeable about the issue, then that's when the invitations come to be engaged at the board level or to be engaged in that way. So that would be my advice to students is, as you're thinking about ways to be further engaged in things like volunteerism and board service, to really find that niche for yourself of an issue you're passionate about and really stick with it.
And I would say that whether it's running a marathon or working as an employee at a nonprofit or serving in an elected official capacity, volunteering is about changing lives, about improving lives, and it comes from a basis of wanting to do that. And as Brian mentioned, that you find the things that you're passionate about and you can find ways to insert yourself and to make a difference. I think the serving on boards and becoming leaders on committees, working groups are all fantastic ways to become an active participant. You all know you can do something, and you can probably do it better than what's currently occurring. So it's very inspiring and motivating to find that opportunity and insert yourself and make a difference. CPS Energy, very much like HEB, uses a program in-house. We look for those up-and-coming leaders, and we help them find and identify opportunities for them to serve, whether it's in our state or our federal trade associations, or whether it is on entities of civic engagement, and help them achieve those positions. And it is about making connections with people. It is a network that becomes part of who you are, either internal to your organization as well as external to the community. Fantastic way to get engaged.
Okay, I want to ask one question that wasn't there ahead of time, which was essentially, what do you see as one skill that was your strength in helping you through your career path, and how did you develop that skill?
I think, especially a career in politics and a career in policy are two totally separate things. If you guys are interested in a career in politics, I think in understanding that politics is cyclical. There are ups and downs, and the Republicans might be in play. In 10 years, that's going to switch, and the parties change and redefine themselves. Just understanding and having this serenity around understanding that politics is cyclical, and your relationships, building relationships is probably the key thing. And that doesn't mean building relationships just with Democrats or just with Republicans, because people change, and your ability to have an impact on policy revolves around your relationships across the board. Your ability to be gainfully employed revolves on relationships across the board. I've seen a lot of friends of mine who have worked in the Capitol who are very dedicated go on to have amazing, amazing careers, either in the private sector or still in the public sector, but it's because of your relationships. So don't build relationships based on political party. Build relationships based on people who you trust, people who who have skills that you would like to mirror. Go and seek those people out. If you see somebody who's really, you like their calmness, you like the way that they think about things, you make those people your friends. It's not about political party. Other skills are perseverance and resilience. And that carries into the corporate world. If you have the ability to take feedback, ask for feedback from people, take it and change and be resilient and be able to fail and have setbacks and overcome that, I think that is the number one quality and trait that you can develop as a leader, something that you can be mindful about and strengthen, and that will change your trajectory in life.
One of the thoughts that I had was about a skill that I think takes time to really develop is this idea of sort of being humbly confident in what you're doing. And I add the word humble or humbling to that because you can also be cocky about your confidence, right? And not come off well to people or individuals. And that's not helpful for building those relationships, which I think is really key and critical to being successful. So being confident about your skill set, about your education, about where you're at, but in a way that's with humility, I think is super important. And I lost the other one I had. I had two that I thought, but maybe I'll come back to it.
So I'll try to build off what you've heard in terms of relationships and having humble confidence, which I think is great skill sets to pay attention to. I would say that to add to that, it's about being diplomatic and tactful. It's a skill set that I do think takes time to hone in, when to know to be bold in a conversation and when to listen. Those are things that in time, it's not like you necessarily learn that in a classroom. You learn that by being maybe in an internship or in a volunteer role where you get technical skills and you gain social skills, and you learn when the moment's right to actually be bold in your statements, to be assertive, and then you also learn when the right time is to listen and to maybe take ideas back. And maybe you come back a day later and you're bold in the same conversation, but knowing when and how to use those skill sets and to really work on perfecting those, I think can make you very, very successful in whether it's politics or in working in and around policy.
Thank you. Brian, do you remember?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in thinking about when you hire, what kind of skills do you look for when you are hiring? And how can the students or those who are entering the workforce build those skills? Kathy?
So I think depending on the role that they're going to fill within your area, but at large, it goes without saying that you want excellent writing and oral skills. I think that's kind of a given. But I would look for and help someone gain how to become concise and very articulate. There are times where in a position of talking on policy or politics, you might get 15 minutes to explain a perspective, or you might get 15 seconds. And so being able to adapt to whichever the situation might be and to be prepared with details and to be prepared with the one statement you want people to leave with. So in hiring and in interviewing skills, I would look for someone who's articulate and someone who can be concise. Another thing that I would look for based on this type of role, specifically for, let's say, lobbying or government relations affairs, would be outgoing. It doesn't mean that an introvert per se can't do this type of role, but it's someone who is comfortable at being outgoing and is seeking conversation is going to be just a bit more comfortable and maybe not as taxed at the end of the day, because it is something that they almost refuel by doing. I have 2 people on my team, one that's very extroverted and one that's introverted, and I've hired them for different reasons. The person who's a little bit more introverted can certainly do the same that the extrovert is doing, but he's an excellent writer, he's an excellent reporter, and he brings back information, reports it back to the utility in a very excellent manner. And the other person is able to be the outward spokesperson to engage and to build those relationships. And so in hiring, those are some criteria, some skill sets that I would look for.
I thought of my other one. It was, so being inquisitive was the other skill that I thought was really important too, because particularly when you're thinking about public policy, there's always another side of the story, there's always another angle. So having that skill and developing that skill to dig deeper, to do the research that you need to do, I think it's important, but it relates really to this topic in terms of things that I would be looking for in an individual to support our work. Is the other thing I would add to what Kathy has said is a critical thinker, somebody who can really carefully analyze and think through situations and do the research that needs to get done so that we're really informed on all angles of issues before kind of moving forward. And so I think even in the work that we do here at the institution is sort of understanding and knowing the resources that we have as an institution, how to leverage those well in the community, but also it requires us to really know the issues in the community well. And so having somebody that can help us really do that is something that I'm looking for in folks that would be working with us.
I look for authenticity. I want to know if you know who you are and why you do the things that you do. So I ask a lot of questions in interviews about how you feel about certain things, what makes you happy, what makes you sad, who are you as a person? And hiring spokespeople for a company, a really large company with a lot of complex issues, being authentic and knowing who you are will give me a good feel of how you're going to react under pressure. So reacting under pressure, under speaking in public forums, or whether it be in a group of media, of journalists badgering you with questions, I want to make sure that you're comfortable and confident and you know why you do the things you do, why you believe the things you do. And so that's really important for me, as well as, of course, the communication skills is a given. But I think authenticity and confidence and presence is something that is important, at least for us when we're hiring on the public affairs side of the business.
Good. Well, I think this is really, really informative because so much of what we heard this morning had revolved around electeds and running for office, and having an impact, and the information in terms of careers in politics goes well beyond that. And it's often careers that we're not always familiar with, and we don't know how to make our way into those areas. So what I'd like to do is open up questions from the audience, because I believe that they provide our panel